Our first talk is by Kilindi Iyi, and the name of the talk is Psilocybin Spores and Organic Artificial Intelligence. Kilindi Iyi is the head instructor and technical advisor of the Tamarian Martial Art Institute. A world traveler and mycologist, Kilindi has presented on the subject of psilocybin as far north as Norway and as far south as Australia. His exploration and research centers on the high-dose psilocybin mushroom. Kilindi shares information gleaned from many excursions into the hyperdimensional and interdimensional realms through his direct experience with dosages in the 20 through 40 dried gram range, mon Dieu, of mushroom ingestion. Kilindi brings decades worth of traveling in novel states of consciousness to share, coupled with the skills of being a master cultivator of exotic mushrooms. And this lends a power and authenticity to his presentations. He remains a student, teacher, and advocate for the hallucinogenic experience. So let's give a big welcome to Kilindi, and I'll step back here. Thank you very, very much.
Morning, everyone. Good. Can you hear me? Very good. Thank you. It's an honor to be here this morning to share a little bit of information to you. And Portland's been great. The Portland Psychedelic Society has treated me well. So good morning. I'm going to start out with a little bit about myself, real quick, to just lay a little bit of background on what I do. I'd like to first thank my wife, my partner, my love, Kai Wingo, who passed in 2016, who was the most courageous psychonaut that I knew. She, untimely, but you know, we get together in the Psychedelic Realms all the time. Usually once a month we get together and hang out in our spot. She was the originator of Women in Entheogens, which is a conference that goes on in Cleveland, Ohio, and once every other year, the last conference, the theme was psilocybin during conception, gestation, birth, and while breastfeeding. And we had many doulas and midwives and women who spoke on psilocybin through all those different phases of the hallucinogenic experience. And you know, we have a lot of mushroom babies around. We call them super babies, and they wear their little mushroom clothes and things like that. So a little bit about myself. It was 1957, and I was in the back of my father's car. My mother and father were in the front seat, and myself and my brother were in the back. And I got a chance to start my journey in entheogens in mind, because I'm an avid adventurer. My knowledge, my understanding, my sensibilities in the realm of mushroom psychedelics are not dealing with psychedelics as a medicine, not for therapy. This thing or whatever. Okay, we're back. We're back. There we go. Psychedelics as a tool for the exploration of consciousness. That's why we utilize high-dose psilocybin. Psilocybin is the quintessential hallucinogen of this earth. It is older than the plant kingdom, because mushrooms are 465 million years older than any plant that ever was on Earth. It's an older paradigm of information. It is not just earthbound, it is extraterrestrial, hyperdimensional, transdimensional, ultradimensional, and these things go so deep, so far, that it is beyond our comprehension in the human mind to fathom really what this is, because it's a grand mystery. And I look at it that way. So we utilize it for exploration, to go where no one has gone before, to see things that no one has seen before, to understand that main theme of what it is to be, at this stage, human and moving out of the human, who we are, what we are, where we're going, because we don't even understand what we are. We just know that one day we were here staring at our mother and father, and we've been lost ever since. So my brand of how I include myself into this world of psychedelics, entheogens, hallucinogens, I use them all interchangeably, is to explore, to be able to take higher and higher doses. Because of course, if we look at the scientific literature on psilocybin, you can't kill yourself with it. You can't eat enough that you can kill yourself. So that's a plus right there. It's not like some of the things, you know, you're dealing with datura, or you're dealing with iboga, or any of the other myriad psychedelics that are in the plethora of different things that are on the earth. Many of them you can kill yourself with it, so you have to know what dosage is and all that kind of stuff. Psilocybin, you can't eat enough to kill yourself, so that's a plus on my end. So when people say, well, how do you eat that much? I'm like, you just came out of Burger King and got a quarter pounder with cheese, and you're gonna ask me how can I eat that much? Now it is quite a bit of it as far as ingesting, because 50 grams of mushrooms is a lot of mushrooms. And you have to have the proper protocol so that you don't throw up. And in mushrooms, we call it throwing up. We don't call it divine purging and all that kind of stuff. If you're taking ayahuasca, it's the purge, and that's the whole thing about it and all that kind of stuff. But mushrooms, you're just throwing up. So mushrooms, we're not really, we're not really that deep. We include the deepness in the actual experience itself. And we're not looking at it to be easy. Many people in the psychedelic realm, they want it to be easy. They all want it to be bubbles and fairies and rainbows and love and all those things. And all those things are there. You'll encounter them in the beginning. Psilocybin is real good with beginners or dabblers or party people. But when you start to get serious and move into the higher levels of this thing, and it gets real, it can be challenging. And we know what that is. Some folks call them bad trips and things like that, but those are the ones that you learn the most from. The ones that are difficult, the ones that challenge you, the ones that you say, after you get finished, that's the last time I'm ever gonna do this again. I've had 10 pounds of mushrooms in my freezer, and after a long 40-gram trip, I've taken the whole thing, stuffed it in the trash, went out to I don't know how it is in Portland, but in Detroit, we have cans, and you put it in there and you set it out on the sidewalk. And so I set it out, well, actually right at the curb on the street. So I put all that stuff in there, threw it on the curb, went back and said, okay, I'm finished. And then I hear the garbage men coming down the street, and all of a sudden it's like, because the old time psychonauts say that if you never said, oh shit, I've taken too much this time, you've not taken enough. Because it is a challenge. And if you go into it thinking that you're not going to be challenged, you're in the wrong business. And if you go into it thinking that the challenges are going to hold you down, you're in the wrong business. So let's kind of get started here. I was in the back seat with my brother, and I looked over the top of the back seat of the car, and this is what I saw. This is from the 7th voyage of Sinbad. And this guy here, I always wanted to see him in real life. So he kind of started me at a very young age on wanting to see weird stuff. And I said, one day I'm going to see that guy. Of course, your parents and older people tell you, well, that's not real, you know, they just made it up. And one thing I've found over the years is that the things that they say that they make up is like Geiger with Aliens, the movie Aliens, the alien world. They asked Geiger, they said, how does your imagination imagine these things? What kind of mind do you have? And he said, imagine? He said, these things are real. What do you mean? I'm just a reporter. Just like Leonardo and Michelangelo are, they're tracers. They were taking entheogens, and they projected the vision that was in the entheogenic experience on the canvas, and then they just traced what they saw. When he went to the quarry and looked out into the quarry, he said, that piece right there, that's the one that I want. Cut it out 8 feet or 12 feet by 6 feet. Because what he saw was the statue of David in the rock already. He wasn't trying to, I'm going to make a statue. No, he was liberating David at the point of decision. And you can see it in the eyes of the statue. He liberated David at the point of decision when he said, I'm going to take Goliath on. And you can see it in the eyes of the statue because David was already there. He was there before the beginning of time, trapped in the quarry. These old world artists were on a different type of stuff. They weren't just painting, they weren't just doing these things. Art, martial arts, all of the crafts and guilds. Even in the Masons, when they say a brother of the craft, they're not talking about the craft that you're working with. He's not talking about making bricks. He's talking about changing the body host into the craft, the transdimensional craft that goes to the world that contain this knowledge and information and bringing it back to the earth. So we say that the spores, the containers of information that are microscopic in many terms, when you see spores, when you see them, they're clumping together. The spores are microscopic. They're in the air we breathe, they're in our clothes, they're in our hair. The fungal kingdom is part of our DNA. It's in the blockchain because, of course, Bitcoin is the psychedelic currency of the multiverse. It was just downloaded to Earth so that you have some real money and get rid of the fiat that we're working with now because all that's closing down. So if you don't have no Bitcoin, I'm not a Bitcoin cheerleader, but you better at least understand what Bitcoin and the blockchain is because it came here to give you some real wealth. So in the blockchain of information, the spores contain the DNA, because DNA is part of a blockchain. That's what it is. DNA, RNA is a blockchain. It's a distributed ledger where information is not centralized, it's dispersed throughout the universe. That's going into quantum mechanics and particle entanglement. That every particle in the beginning was entangled, and when it spread out to create a universe, every particle is in communication with every other particle in the universe. And we'll get into the quantum mechanics part a little later. But the spores came to the Earth from extraterrestrial impacts and means. Those things that came and hit the earth, deposited spores through panspermia, and when the conditions were correct, the conditions were right, it liberated its information to a being that was available to be able to gather it, hold it, sustain it, and give it back to his brothers and sisters as technology in the world. Scientists say that 14 billion years, and it's much more than 14 billion years, this universe, but they say that there's not been enough time since the so-called Big Bang till today for you to be able to tie a clove-hitch knot. Sailors, you know how many times a boat just floated away before they knew how to tie a knot? Or somebody said, hey, let's make some rope. These are things that came from the great libraries. Helena Petrova-Blavatsky in the Theosophical Society said that it was the Akashic records or the Akashic records that contained the compendium of knowledge of the universe. Nothing was lost. Things came through wormholes and deposited themselves into the libraries, and they accessed the libraries through high-dose psychedelics. If not, we'd still be walking around in the sand on the Sahara, trying to steal some meat from the great predators. So it comes from outer space. It comes from inner space to the earth, and we're utilizing it now. And the thing about it is that we've cracked the codes on being able to produce it ourselves. That's the wonderful thing about psilocybin. It doesn't hurt the environment. If you're utilizing ayahuasca, not enough ayahuasca for everybody to be coming from Prague and from Paris and from London and from Portland and from Detroit and from all these places going down to Peru, pulling up plants for ayahuasca ceremony. But with a little bit of rice and a little bit of vermiculite, you can grow psilocybin mushrooms in the comfort of your own home, in the comfort of your own kitchen in the cabinet, in your bathroom, under your bed, in the basement. And you have enough to then plot out your excursions. One problem has been with psilocybin is that you've never taken enough, and you've never taken it often enough to be able to start morphing the neurons into higher levels of access into the multiverse. Most of the genre dealing with psilocybin and others right now is basically in the medical model, and that's great work. I believe in it. I think it's necessary. If you're depressed, if you have post-traumatic stress disease, or any of those things, mushrooms will do it for you. Because mushrooms will do what any of the other psychedelics on earth will do at the proper dosage. But you can't take the one dose and say, oh, well, I have to get some ketamine, and oh, well, I have to get some ayahuasca, and well, I have to get some salvia, and well, I have to get this and that and those things. I've taken a lot of psychedelics, a lot of different psychedelics, because I speak and I want to be able to talk intelligently on it from experience. Not like many of the luminaries in the psychedelic realms who have books, who be at the parties eating strawberries and drinking champagne and have never taken any psychedelics at all. Or like Terrence McKenna said, they took a piss-ass amount, enough to say that they're in the genre without completely lying, I took 2 grams when I was in college back in 1970, and I'm pushing that into the realm of psychedelics now, because that's what a lot of them are doing. Not everybody, but there are a lot of them faking the funk in the genre of the African community's psychedelic music, P-Funk, make my funk the P-Funk. It wasn't all the Grateful Dead. When did you ever see the Grateful Dead land a spaceship on the, on the stage? And a guy with a diaper jumps out in the midst of smoke and lights. We have here a impact. And I'm gonna go into a little bit of Younger Dryas history. 12,800 years ago, there was an asteroidal impact on the Laurentide ice sheet. At Saginaw, Michigan, about 50 miles from my house, it carved out Lake Erie, and it knocked ice from Michigan all the way to North Carolina, moving at 17,000 miles an hour, and created what are called the Carolina Bays. We know it because they're all holes, they're all going in the same direction, and there's water in them. Most of the Great Lakes and other lakes around are meltwater from this impact. Because after the last ice age, the Pleistocene, we had this impact that changed the climate of the world. It destroyed the majority of civilizations in the United States, changed the climate worldwide, changed the temperature, which shut down the North Atlantic current, which when solar radiation comes in at the equator and is accumulated and held by the salt water, when all this water from this impact happened, it threw gajillions of gallons of fresh water into the Atlantic Ocean, into the Gulf and things like that, and what it did was slowed that whole thing down. So the heat that is usually brought up to make a temperate climate was liberated before it got north and threw the world into a next ice age, which was called the Younger Dryas, after the Dryas flower that during Arctic times flourished. So between that impact and another, which flipped it back, which was 11,600 years ago, and flipped it back to temperate climates, as Robert E. Howard says in Conan, a time of high adventure, because all of the civilizations which are on shores were washed away from the time when the oceans sank Atlantis to the rise of the sons of Aries. There was a time unheard of. And in that time, that's when Atlantis sunk. I know most scientists will say, well, there's not an Atlantis. Well, of course, you didn't call it Atlantis. That's what Plato called it. But every high culture sitting on the water got drowned out because this impact raised the water table 400 feet. The Indonesian archipelago, going all the way over to the Philippines, was a continuous landmass. It was a continuous landmass between Morocco and Gibraltar and the Iberian Peninsula. So people could just walk across to different places. So knowledge spread. Knowledge was accumulated. Then it got washed out, except for a few places. This was the Younger Dryas debris field coming from the Great Lakes, Greenland, an airburst, and an impact in the ocean. Was 4 extraterrestrial events. They don't know whether it was comets or asteroids or meteors. They just know they was big and moving fast, coming out of the torrid meteor stream, of which we're moving into in the next week and a half, because we move through the torrid meteor stream twice a year, in June and November. And those are the shards of meteors that destroyed the dinosaurs. They're still up. We get ready to go through it now. It's like, I think Graham Hancock says, it's like moving across a 12-lane highway with a blindfold on. and do that twice a year. What it did was it created an environment that killed the megafauna of the United States or North America. If anybody is familiar with the Game of Thrones and they saw the wolves in there that were about this tall, they traversed North America. The flat-nosed bear, which was the most horrific predator. Okay. Well, we missed the rest of our animals, but we'll go back. So the North America was very different. The flora and fauna was very different. Things that proliferated during the time prior to that impact no longer proliferated because the land was changed. I think there were a lot more mushrooms in North America. There still are a lot of undiscovered psilocybin mushrooms in North America. Since we've only been looking for about 20 years, you know, we think it's kind of sparse when really it's not. This is a artificial intelligence that was created by some civilization, some person, the organizers. I don't believe in creation. I think everything that exists has always been here and will always be here. But you have organizers. And the organizers can organize out of what is here into the things that we see. Now that means, you know, this could be a junior high school, 8th grade science project, make a world and put people in it. Doesn't have to be the divine, you know, singing the divine and the Lord above, you know, just be an 8th grade science experiment, you know. And that's why the kid who created it for a science project, he's indifferent. Words no more about me and you as you do about Super Mario. So you pray for this to happen and he's, you know, looking at something on TV and you're in the computer trying to get out. The Matrix. Dr. Frank Drake said that there were billions and billions and billions of different civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy. And then Enrico Fermi said, well, if there's so many civilizations all over the place, why aren't we seeing them? Why aren't we seeing flying saucers flying through the room and exotic creatures and all that kind of stuff? Because they're there. But you don't have access to them till you take your normal consciousness, pair it with that organic artificial intelligence whose algorithms hit a certain frequency inside of your head, then you have access to that. Because many people in this audience, I've seen them. Everything imaginable. Everything unimaginable. They want to say that, hey, you're hallucinating, it's all in your mind. No, some of the stuff I see on a Saturday night after I've taken 40 grams, I couldn't imagine that. And no one else that I know could imagine that. You're hitting standalone systems that have absolutely nothing to do with the human epic. People say, well, you know, you take all these mushrooms, you know, how do you integrate that? I say, I can't integrate 40 grams of mushrooms into the human dynamic. What am I going to do? You know, does it make you a better person? I would like it to, but doesn't necessarily have to be. You know, you can still be an asshole eating mushrooms. What do you bring back? I mean, people taking small doses of bringing things back. That's what they're doing in Silicon Valley. They microdosing, you know. It's moving things around in their brain, helping them think outside of the box, you know, Well, if we put 2 mufflers on this car, it'll have a greater torque ratio. Well, where did you get that from, Fred? Well, I don't know. And then you say, well, let's try some mushrooms. You know, I tell you what, we could make an electric car that drives itself. Let's name it after Nikola Tesla. So what Hugo de Garay said is that we should move from SETI, which is search for extraterrestrial intelligence, to SEPI. SEPI is the search for infraparticle intelligence. In other words, the intelligence of the very small. This is where the super servers that generate the macro reality of which we exist in are contained. Under the Planck length, which is 10 to the negative 35, where scientists say that that's where everything's in, that's the smallest you can get. You can't go no smaller. You trying to tell me you got a pie that's small and you can't cut it in half? No, that's where it begins. That's what we're looking at. Planck length, 10 to the negative 35. The nanometer, that's what your phone works on, a miracle of technology. This is where magic starts, 10 to the negative 15. That's where replicators start, because they're having conferences on femtotech now. And they're working on replicators now. So people will say, in 2050, we're going to have a crisis, a food crisis in 2050. I'm like, what futuristic magazines you reading? In 2050, folks will say, as does Jean-Luc Picard in his room on the Starship Enterprise, Earl Grey tea. Computer, Earl Grey tea. And out of the virtual realms, out of nothing, it produces a saucer, then it produces a cup, then it organizes water molecules, it heats the water molecules, it puts the algorithm of Earl Grey tea in the water at the proper temperature with the right sweetness, because it creates all of that from nothing. And you can say the same thing with, give me 2 Whoppers with cheese and hold the mayo. Those things won't be a problem. We're so close to magic in the regular realm. They just trying to, they got some problems, and by eating mushrooms and microdosing LSD, they'll go through those problems real quick. The very, very small realms is where the information is. That's where it's contained. That's how you build it into the world that we see, that builds solidity, the collapse of the wave into the particle, through observation, pairing with consciousness. And I'm saying all these things to say that you have an access point to this knowledge and information through the psychedelic realms. And I'm not downplaying anything else, but psilocybin is just, it's my thing. And like I said earlier, since you can't kill yourself with it, that's the best way to go. The best way to go with me. Iboga is an ordeal. It's a West African shrub that you take, and if you do the real Iboga ceremony in the Bwiti, the old Bwiti, because you have the new Bwiti and you have the old Bwiti. If you take the doses that are in the actual ceremony, they take you all the way to the door of death. And the elders sit back there and say, okay, that's it. Because if you take one more gram, you're going to be dead as Abraham Lincoln. They take you to the brink of death. With psilocybin, you die all the time. But your physical body doesn't die. And that's one thing I've learned through psychedelic mushrooms that I brought back, is that the only thing that can't be done in all of space and time, ultra-dimensionals, all the different worlds and universes and galaxies, the only thing you can't do is die. The only thing you can do is, that you can't do is stop existing. You've always existed and you will always exist. Now, according to your thoughts, you can create some crazy stuff, you know. You can be stuck in some pretty dark and deep places, and then you can be stuck in some places that you think you want to be in. You can be stuck in a white robe, standing on streets of gold, drinking milk and honey, and singing for a couple of trillion years. You know, after a while, you can be like, I'm kind of tired of this singing. You want to get out of here? You know, and milk and honey, you know, give me the runs, and the golden streets are going to be, you know. But through psychedelics and access, you get to understand that there's adventure abounds, beauty abounds. So a good rendition of going into the infraparticle realms was given to us by Disney through the Marvel Universe. This is Ant-Man going subatomic.
Oh no.
Getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Going through the quantum realms. Now on a good Saturday night, this ain't the trip. This is on the way to the trip. You haven't even got there yet. Haven't got to the basement. You still falling down the stairs. But that's a good rendition because Marvel and Disney did their research. They not only had people who had experience with psychedelics giving them reports, glean the literature, YouTube, every source, to be able to have a coherent visualization of what going subatomic would look like. These are different mushrooms from the African compendium of psychedelics, because Africa has psychedelics just as South America does. Because in Pangea, when the continents were together, it was the same fauna and flora. And when they parted, they didn't stop making monoamine oxidase inhibitors because they separated. You have rainforests in Africa. As a matter of fact, last week's or 2 weeks ago, they had their, only 10 minutes. I haven't got to the third slide yet. Okay. Africa was on fire also. As a matter of fact, it's still on fire. The Amazon was on fire and Africa was on fire. As a matter of fact, 3 times the fire that was in the Amazon was burning in Africa. Because many times we kick Africa off because it's the dark continent. I'm gonna move through these quickly because I only have 10 minutes. This is the custodians of the Duna mushroom, the Fang people. Now, National Geographic did Africa this service for 100 years. They took pictures of people like this in Africa, and they said, this is how the Africans are. See how they got the crazy mask on? And the mask is an entheogenic tool. They don't hang them on the walls. If you've seen Iron Man and you see inside of the mask where everything is going to computer diagnostics of the suit and connection into other things going on, that's what's going on in that mask. And the eyes project that into the community because he's taking a particular psychedelic and the community is taking the psychedelic too. So if I was here and all of that and you took the psychedelic, I took the psychedelic, I could then project what's inside of that mask out to you and you'll visualize it and see what's going on. Dinner with this service said to the world, this is what Africa is, this is what they do. Can you imagine cooking dinner in that? Going to the well to get water? Breastfeeding your baby with this suit on? So, at the Breaking Convention Conference, I told them and showed them this picture. I said, now what if National Geographic said this is London? These are the wild men of London. See the red on their face? They eat people. The feathers and things in their hair and all that. I said, this is London. People in London weren't really happy about the picture, but it just shows how you can slant a particular narrative. Let's move into this. Ansar, Lord of the Underworld. When they say underworld, they're not talking about under the ground, Dante's Inferno. They're talking about the subatomic realms from which this reality is generated. We'll move through this quickly. This is metal nature. This is hieroglyphics, but its proper name is metal nature. What they're doing, this is the ceremony of the opening of the mouth, where you have the mushroom caps on the table of the food of the gods, and they're getting ready to open the mummy's mouth so they can put the mushrooms in it so that he can traverse the underworld, the subatomic world. This is a map for traversing the underworld in life. You eat the mushrooms and you go into this world because at certain doses of eating the mushroom, this becomes animate, starts walking around the walls and they start doing stuff. At higher doses, they come off the wall into your environment. If it's in your bedroom or wherever you set up your the bridge of the Starship Enterprise. What, you haven't set up a bridge for your sojourns? Got a special bed, special chair. I sit in the chair like, how the engine, Scotty? Great, Captain. Okay. Sulu, take us out. We get out of this part of the solar system. All right, warp 7. Boop, boop. And then at higher doses, the highest doses, you go into this realm, you go into this world. Because this world no longer has any permanency here, so your wall, your bed, those things dissolve and you go here. That's where they got this stuff from. The pre-Kemetic spiritual people going high dose, sojourned into these realms, and that's how they brought that information back. That's why the mushrooms at Angkor Wat in Cambodia built Cambodia. The mushrooms in Mexico, they built the Olmec, the Toltec, the Mayan, and the Aztec civilizations. All of that jaguar night and all of that stuff. The mushrooms that were here prior to 10,000 BC when it stopped raining, because that meteor hit and it changed the environment and created desert. The mushrooms that built all of this, they saw these things. They didn't just imagine them. Moving through this real quick, because this is Ansar Osiris in his mushroom form. That's the secret to ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet, that mushroom, the underworld, accessing. So you have here the mushroom, the shaft is the male, and the cap is the female. You have the same thing as a mushroom, so that's why I put the mushroom next to it. So that for people who were hard-headed and can't see it, I put it there so you can see it. This is the Apis bull, of which they learned the technology of growing mushrooms. The Apis bull They grazed him on canary grass, which is a DMT. It also has 5-MeO-DMT. It also has an included monoamine oxidase inhibitor. That's what they fed the bull. This is psilocybin mushrooms growing on a cow pie. This is the sacred beetle who pushes the dung ball across until he buries it. When the baby beetles come out, it's picked up spores, and the baby beetles eat psilocybin mushrooms. That's why it's part of the iconography of Egypt. This is scarification. We're going to this because it's more familiar. The tattoo artist or the tattoo priest or tattoo priestess takes their entheogen, sees what's on your body, because this solidifies your spiritual power into your physical body. They can't put on it what they want to put on it. You can't put mom or some Chinese characters or, or what you want. They want a death oath. If you put the wrong thing on there, one line wrong, not where it's supposed to be, then you're no longer part of this guild. Because you've then disturbed the spiritual power of this person. The person's no longer any good on earth if you mess up one line. Let's move to this. Spore print. Thing about it, spore prints are, if you don't know how to grow mushrooms, you only need one spore print in your life. You can produce millions of pounds. I could take that one spore print and produce 1 million pounds of mushrooms. I could pass that spore print down to my grandchildren. Okay, it's mushroom underside. It's the circle within a circle. How much time I got? 5 minutes? Okay. Okay, that's, knowledge is built on previously successful areas of information. So we have, let's go back here real quick. You have the underside of the mushroom cap, and you have the picture from CERN, a subatomic particle. The circle within the circle with the lines radiating out. There's a lot of information on it I can talk about. This is DMT, Acacia nilotica, the acacia of the Nile, which was used in a brew or tea. Ayahuasca is similar to it. Utilized the monoamine oxidase inhibitor. The Maasai, who was the most fierce group in Africa during the 19th century, they used the DMT as they are Maroons, part of that society. What they do is they ingest the brews. One is for long distance running, one is for individual fighting, one is for group pampat, one is for individual fighting lions, and one is for group fighting lions. So you take the DMT brew and you go out and fight a lion. This is the Nasut Biti, of which people call the Pharaoh, but its proper name is Nasut Biti, suckling from the DMT tree, which is a tree of life, the tree of which Ansan, Aset, or Isis and Osiris were born fully formed from the acacia tree. That's the Maasai. This is going into Paganum harmala, which is monoamine oxidase inhibitor. These are the seeds. I can go through a lot of this. I don't have much time. Trying to get to the last side. The magic carpet of Aladdin. This is a place. It's not just a carpet to sit on. Sometimes it's put on the wall, just like the tapestries in the Vatican. You walk down the Vatican, going to the Sistine Chapel ceiling, and you're walking down. I don't know if you've ever been to the Vatican, but you're walking down the hall, and the tapestries are watching you walk down the hall like this, because it's all psychedelic. And I'd love to sit in the Vatican and take about 30 grams of mushrooms and look at them tapestries. But this is the place. The Mandalas, they're not just good art, they're places. This is the place of study. This is what the mandala, once three-dimensionalized, becomes. It's a school. You go here to learn. You sit with the saints and spiritual people on the hyperdimensional realms and learn. 2 minutes. and I'll be finished. But this is what the mandala is when they pour the sand on the ground. It's not that. It's a place that they go into. They get real small, just like Ant-Man did, and they go into the mandala, and this is what the mandala becomes, the place. Same with Buddhist tapestries. Same with the Sinbad puzzle box from Hellraiser. This is the place. They didn't just make this up for the movie. Pinhead and those guys, they live in there. You don't believe me? Let's go to the toy store, buy one of these. It can be plastic. We take 20 grams and we'll go both sit in front of it. And if Pinhead and them don't come out, we're the Mahabharata, the sovereign yoga of Krishna, imparting the Bhagavad Gita inside of the Mahabharata to Krishna was done with soma, which was the hallucinogenic drink that gave him the ability to be able to, that's the chakra also. Don't have time to go through, but when he gave him the soma and said, I want to see you for what you are, and he imbued from himself the supreme knowledge of Godhood. So I think I have to end now. That's Krishna and the chakra. I'll be around for folks to talk. That's Helena Petrovna Blavatsky with the Theosophical Society. P. Beverly Randolph. So I'm out of time. That's Professor Gates. But thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.